but there's also call me option.
Okay, call me option. Okay.
Okay, so hang up your phone. In the call me option, just type your phone number and Zoom will call you and connect your two accounts.
You do have to hang up your other Zoom, your phone Zoom first.
We're in high tech here, people.
Welcome to those of you that are just joining us. Hi, Margot. Hi, Jonathan, Debbie. Good to see you all. Hey, Trish.
Hey, everyone.
Can you tell me if you can hear me okay now?
Hello? Can you hear me good?
Yes, Douglas, you're good.
Perfect.
Ned, you're still in a tunnel.
Ned, would you like to try what Douglas just did and switch your audio to your phone? Do you have your phone next to you?
I do. Okay, so you cannot hear me. Is that right?
It's just very muffled.
Yeah, we just on the, I mean, I was on the Zoom with the CAC and they seemed to think I came through loud and clear yesterday. So I wonder what the difference is.
It could just be your internet connection today.
Mine is saying that low system resources are affecting my audio quality too.
Yeah,
I don't know what I sound like.
Prevalent thing.
It's probably Zoom is letting you know, Debbie, that they prefer a different resource. It's like, no, Zoom, this is what we have.
For those of you just joining us, welcome. Happy Wednesday. Looks like a lot of you are just joining at the last minute, so we'll probably start in just a few moments.
Hi, Margot.
Good evening to those of you that are just joining us. Welcome to the AB 617 Community Steering Committee meeting for the Stockton community. We're going to get started in just a few moments. We're just waiting for the rest of the committee to sign on. Hope you're having a great day. We're very excited to see you all again this month. On your screen are some reminders for how to rename your screen name. And if you need any help doing that, now's a great time to check in with the facilitation team if you need any help. We'll be toggling between this screen and the next one to remind you about putting yourself on mute and some of the other Zoom control needs if you have them. And for those of you that are having audio issues, there is the option to connect your phone and your video. So you can do your audio through your phone. You just need to connect your accounts and link them with the participation ID number. So that's definitely something we can walk you through if you have any struggles with internet today. It seems like a lot of people are having a little bit of internet challenges today. Lots of people on Zooms this evening.
Well, we're finally in the red. Woo woo!
Congratulations.
Fantastic news.
It's a whole new world in the red. Hi, Albert. Thanks for saying hello.
Good afternoon, everyone. Great to join you all. See, I came prepared. I'm wearing red for that move to red stuff.
You are ready. Mary Elizabeth is looking ahead to orange. She's looking
Yeah,
ahead.
she is.
We are almost there. It looks like we've got a pretty good group of people on the line. We're just going to give it a couple more seconds before we begin our meeting. So thanks to all of you for joining us this evening, and we'll get started in just a couple seconds. All right, well, I do know that we have a pretty full agenda today, so I don't want us to delay too long, and we're already recording live on Facebook and YouTube. So why don't we go ahead and get started with just some of the formalities associated with our meeting. Good evening. My name is Erica Manuel. I'm the CEO of a nonprofit organization called ILG. I am happy to lead the facilitation team for this AB 617 community, along with my team members, Hannah and Kim, who you should be pretty familiar with now. They are waving on your screen, and we are here to help you with any problems you might have throughout the meeting. We are really committed to making sure this is an inclusive process this evening. So I think we're all good with our sign language interpreter, but I want to make sure that that system's working correctly. And I think I've got a green light. I just want to make sure that all of our connections are good. Douglas, are you good?
Douglas is good.
Douglas is good. Perfect. Thank you. So we've had a lot of Zoom meetings, so we're going to dispense with the majority of the Zoom logistics for the sake of time tonight, but we are going to put up some Zoom control reminders to refresh your memories. So on the screen, you're going to see two different slides. One is to remind you of how to rename your screen name to make sure that we know who is in the room today, the Zoom room. And then we also want to remind you that if you have any challenges with renaming, the ILG team can help you do that. If you are in the stipend program for residents, you should stay in this meeting for 75% of the meeting to get credit for it. And just as a reminder and a courtesy, this meeting is being recorded and there will be public comments at the end. We do always plan for the possibility that votes might be taken at this meeting, so the ILG team is going to change some of your screen names behind the scenes so that we can keep track of all voting members. So if you do see some changes to your screen name that you didn't make, that's because we did. If we do come to a vote this evening, we want to make sure we can do that quickly. These CSC meetings are always open to the public, and we are grateful to the public members that participate on YouTube or on Facebook. But we do ask that any members of the public on the Zoom line participate in the public comment portion of the meeting at the end, and we will also make sure to leave time for public comments at the end as well. Your questions and comments can be posted via email as well on the email address ab617@valleyair.org during the meeting, and we'll make sure to address those at the public comment period at the end. So before we move to the other portion of the agenda, I just want to see if there are any participants logging in by phone that we need to have checked or renamed for attendance purposes. I'm going to ask Hannah and Kim behind the scenes if there's anyone that we need to ask about that is phone that we need to have renamed.
I am not seeing anybody at this time.
Excellent. All right. So now that your SERP is approved and our meeting schedule has returned to normal, we have actually brought back the monthly community co-host. And so tonight's community co-host is Jeff Wingfield with the Port of Stockton. And at this time, I just want to turn it over to your Air District host and your community co-host for them to say a few words about this meeting before we talk about the agenda and the background. So I will turn it over to Ryan and Jeff.
Yes, good evening, everyone. Very excited to be here after the Community Emission Reduction Program was approved by the district's board and forwarded on to the California Air Resources Board for their approval. And want to thank this Community Steering Committee so much for the 15 months of work, the numerous meetings, just the overall commitment that all of you have shown throughout this process. And just to share our organizational appreciation, as well as our appreciation for the partner agencies who have been involved all throughout this. Many of them like CARB and Jeff at the port, the Albert with the city and the county representatives like Robin and others, and then the community groups, obviously. Very appreciative of their involvement in working with residents and making sure that they have information to be able to fully participate. And so just want to thank you and share appreciation, and looking forward to these next 5 years of working closely together with all of you to implement all of the measures fully, get those emission reductions, get the exposure reductions that are going to benefit all of you that live in the Stockton area. So thanks. And I'll turn it over to Jeff.
Thanks, Ryan. Thanks, everybody. I just wanted to make a quick plug for our outreach committee is taking shape. I think I've sent a lot of the information out to this group. We're trying to get the first meeting scheduled early next week. And so I think one of the things that I was requesting when I sent something out was to indicate what times and days work best for everybody. So we're tentatively looking at Tuesday or Wednesdays, and either the options are doing it during the lunch hour or the late afternoon, whichever works best for people, and we can get the most participation and input. So if you have an opinion on that, if you could send that to me within the week. By the end of this week, we're going to schedule that first meeting and try to get that process underway. We have had some good progress with the port and the board. I think if anybody was watching some of our most recent board meetings, the commission has agreed to read public comments, which is a good step. I know some of the there were some big issues with that, so we've passed that hurdle. The board is also supportive of our outreach plan, and they will participate in that. And so we're making good progress, as Mary Elizabeth suggested in her comments the other day. So I'm hopeful that we can continue. I'm looking forward to working with all of you and having some good dialogue and communication, and sharing our goals that we share, and working through some of the issues of transparency and other things that this group has experienced and laid out to me. And then before I go, just one plug for our owl cams. We do have baby owls that have just hatched in the last week on our owl cam. So if anybody's interested in that, they can go check them out. They're really cool. I'm trying not to be distracted by them now, but we've got 3 boxes. I think there's five babies right now, but if you're interested in that. And that's all I really have. Thanks, Ryan. Thanks, everybody.
Jeff, thank you for that update. This is a great meeting for you to be the co-chair of, because I know there's going to be additional conversations today on the agenda discussing the port, and the owl cam sounds amazing. You got a lot of heart emojis for that one. I think we're excited to see that. Also, I did note that there are a couple things in the chat for you as it relates to your outreach committee, which is very exciting, and I'm sure we'll hear a little bit more about in the meeting as we move forward. So thanks to both of you. So I'm going to put up on the screen the agenda for tonight's meeting. And while the exact discussion time frames are approximate, we do plan to have a 2-hour meeting tonight that's going to end around 7. We're going to start by discussing some of the feedback we received about conduct during meetings, and we're going to talk about the recent SERP adoption and the next steps that you're going to have in that process. And then we're going to discuss the port, which has really become a pretty topical conversation, an important part of this committee's work, and is of considerable interest to the group. And I'm excited to hear that there's already progress that's being made and has been made since the last meeting. So that's exciting to learn more about tonight. And then the last thing we're going to do is we're going to discuss the potential location of community air monitoring equipment. And there has been another committee effort, a subcommittee effort that's related to the camp. And so you're going to hear a little bit more about their work and their recommendations for some of the monitoring equipment and where those placements can take place. So if you can pull that off the agenda down, I will just say that, you know, ILG is acting as a neutral facilitator tonight. So I'll be facilitating tonight's conversation
I think
as
so
we basically
too.
have
Kimberly,
three
I didn't
main
even
goals.
look because I won't even go look at the site. What did they post with you?
Oops, sorry, we're going to mute you. One of the things that we do is make sure that the logistics of the meeting run. And so you'll see some activity sometimes to make sure that we reduce background noise and things like that. Certainly not out of disrespect, but just out of making sure that everyone has a chance to be heard. The other things that we try and do in our meeting is honor the charter that this committee identified. And so they said, and you said in your charter, that you wanted to make sure that there were a wide variety of community voices heard and incorporated into the record. So during every meeting, that's part of our job, to make sure that all the voices, even some minority opinions, are able to be shared and reflected in the meeting minutes. We also help ensure that the meeting agenda is fully covered and that we start and end on time as closely as possible. And we do that to respect the schedules of the presenters, the interpreters, and the other attendees. And then we try to leave enough time for public comment, which also means we sometimes need to limit the discussion to move items along. If we do that, that is the only reason, because we want to make sure that we honor that public engagement process. And then the last thing we do is we want to make sure that the conversation and the tone are as productive as possible and respectful as possible. And I know that there's more conversation to be had there as well. One of the things that I will say is that we understand that a lot of the issues that you guys discuss in these meetings are very sensitive. And some people who attend these meetings or who are members of this committee have experienced not only harm, but also trauma as a result of some of the practices or institutions that we work with. And so as a result of that, a lot of times people express frustration or anger during meetings. And as your facilitator, I just want to honor those feelings. I want to acknowledge those. But I also want to say that it's important to center our shared values and our shared goals. And so that's something that I'm committed to as well. And I know that Ryan wanted to talk a little bit more about conduct and some feedback that he's received from the committee members after the last meeting. So I want to turn it over to Ryan to take us into our first agenda item, which is related to a discussion of some conduct.
Yeah. So
very quickly, I also had a clarification about the charter and the voting process that hopefully could be relatively quick. But it's never been clear to me whether the 50% plus one that's in the charter for voting is 50% plus one of who is actually present in the meeting at that time, or it's 50% plus one of the total number of people on the CSC. If we could just have that clarified in the event that we may vote tonight, I would appreciate that.
Absolutely. Happy to do that.
do you want me to clarify that, Erica? Or?
If you have the answer now, go for it.
Yeah, it'd be the 50 plus one of the steering committee members in attendance at the meeting. Well, good evening, everyone. I know you got to hear a little from me at the beginning. You know, as representing the Air District, you know, we definitely want to make sure that we're doing everything that we can to make these meetings as productive as possible and to create a safe environment for all of the steering committee members. This is the largest steering committee that we have, somewhere I think in the realm of 50 total steering committee members. And as everybody can imagine, having a committee this large, there's going to be a lot of different opinions, a lot of different points of view. And to add on top of that, you know, the AB 617 program, Erica touched on it a little bit. There's a lot of emotion behind why we're here, right? The areas that have been selected for a reason, that they've been disproportionately impacted negatively by air pollution. And there's a lot of historical reasons for that. And so this is it is an emotionally charged atmosphere. And so, you know, being mindful of that and respecting that and giving people the opportunity to speak on that. And at the same time, doing it in a manner where it's respectful and still allows for people to feel free to share their thoughts and opinions without concerns of potential negative responses or feedback. So a couple of the things I just want to touch on real quick that we've heard concerns by steering committee members, and ask a few things from the steering committee members moving forward. So the use of emails to steering committee members, if there's something that the steering committee members wish to be sent out to the rest of the committee, to please use us. Please forward the email to us to send out to the rest of the steering committee members. One of the tasks and responsibilities that the district has is to maintain updated lists of who's on the steering committee members, what their email addresses are, to make sure that it is reaching everybody that it's intended to. We've heard about some emails in the past that have been intended to go out to everybody, and some people have been missed, and that was noticed, and concern was raised by that. And I know that wasn't the intent of anybody, and we want to be helpful in that effort to make sure that it is reaching everybody that it's intended to. So that would be one of them. The other one would be that to the extent that email has been used to have conversations about steering committee business or community steering committee business, that we use the steering committee meetings as the forum. And we know that the meetings have been jam-packed, and that we were hard pressed to get through the things that we did. And moving forward, we are fully committed to having agenda setting meetings where the things that the steering committee want to agendize and have on meetings, that they get placed on there, so that the meetings can be the forum for that. And so we would ask that the steering committee members use this as the forum for those conversations. The other thing we heard about was the chat, and there's a couple of things with the chat. One is that sometimes the sheer volume of the information that's going on in the chat is sometimes overwhelming for some of the steering committee members, especially when they're trying to focus on what's being discussed in the meeting. So trying to balance the two makes it very challenging. So to the maximum extent possible, if there's information that needs to get put in, to do that, but be mindful of that it's not distracting from the conversation, that if the chat is pertinent to the conversation, and if it's at all possible, waiting until there's more of a break to add it if it's a question or a comment, so that way we can try to incorporate those and respond to all those at the same time, just to streamline it and make it the meeting more efficient, and kind of serving the needs of all of our steering committee members. The other thing that we heard is sometimes some of the comments that have been put into the chat, and this kind of gets back to the nature of AB 617, and sometimes the emotions come out, that some of the comments haven't been constructive, and in some of the feedback we received is that it can be construed as intimidating or bullying, which decreases the desire for some of the steering committee members to participate. And I know that's not the intent of anybody. I think everybody here has shown a strong desire for everybody to have a voice in these meetings, to be able to talk freely and to share their thoughts and opinions. And so, it is on the Air District to talk about these and bring these up, because, like we said, we're going to be in this together for 5 years, working through these things, and we want it to be as productive as possible. The last thing that was brought up was alternates. And so if you have an alternate and you're the primary member, the primary member is the representative. So when it comes to the steering committee meeting itself, the primary would be speaking on behalf of either themselves as a resident or their organization. And if the alternate does attend, then the expectation would be that the alternate participate as a public member in the opportunities that are given to all the public members. And that really has to do with going back to, we have 50 voices, and so wanting to make sure that each of the voices that are participating are given equal weight and the equity of that. So this is I hope everybody understands that the reason why we're having this discussion is because we want this to be a fruitful, productive, ongoing process for all of you. So thank you very much for your time. We greatly appreciate it.
Thank you, Ryan. I want to make sure we allow any opportunity for people to comment on what you've heard from Ryan before we move into some specifics about that. And I certainly will give a little bit more detail. Anyone? Mary Elizabeth, you had some comments about Ryan's last note.
Yes, thank you very much. And I appreciate, you bringing up the agenda setting meeting. And I think there was a time, there was like some kind of, leadership group or, what have you. But I would really like for you to consider, sending out invitations to everyone, because if there is something, that they want to talk about and they want to get on the agenda, then, they need to come to the meeting. Now, you may not be able to, have a Google poll or what have you, however you do that, but, or you could do that and then just cut it short and then make your decision on what time you're meeting. But I think that everyone should have an opportunity to attend that. Thank you.
Thanks for the feedback, Mary. And we can do that. That's definitely what we do for South Central Fresno and for chapter. When we set those meetings, we do send out an invite to all the steering committee members and let them know that it is optional to participate. And we don't want the opportunity and the ability to share potential agenda items only to that. I mean, if someone has an item that they want, please feel free to also email us and let us know if you can't make that meeting for whatever reason. I see Doug.
Great.
Has his hand up.
Wonderful. Thank you, Ryan. I see Douglas's hand, and then we'll move on. Douglas, did you have a comment?
He's muted.
Or question? I can't
Douglas,
see your
press
screen at the moment.
*6 on your phone. Press *6 on your phone, and you will be unmuted. Here you go.
Okay. Yes, I have a question. I talked to Hannah or Zong yesterday regarding at some time as a member, there was a lot of meeting last month, and I thought I had to go to the same subcommittee. But but at the same time, I want to. Sometimes you don't have to require to go there. Sometimes because I believe it's like. There's some way to go and to get involved. I guess you make sure you'll be part of the main meeting of the steering committee as well. And can you elaborate it from last time we were talking yesterday?
And to clarify, Douglas, did you say you talked to me?
Was it you yesterday?
No,
maybe it was Heather or Zong.
Yeah,
Heather?
right there.
Maybe.
Yeah.
yes, Douglas talked to me. Douglas, we talked about the steering committee meetings. He was worried. He was wondering about the BART meeting notice that he received and wondered if that was related to our regular CSC meetings. And I let Douglas know at that time that that's a different meeting, and only the regular CSC meetings qualify for the stipend, and any subcommittee meetings or like the BART meeting, which is totally separate, those would not qualify for the stipend.
Great, thank you.
So I just want to know the difference next time. I just want to follow up with the other people that might think that it is overdue to let us know if it's a requirement, it's a mandatory, or it's just a voluntary thing that we do. I think that, you know, I mean, I got to work too, but it's overwhelming, but all it's well about, I like to participate as well. That's all. Thank you.
Yeah, so, yeah, so to clarify on that, Douglas, so part of the AB 617 legislation requires districts to do what's called best available retrofit control technology evaluation of their rules. So basically reviewing existing rules that organizations have to see if there is any opportunity to evaluate the rules, see if there's anything else out there that is better control technology that would may be required. And so that evaluation process, that notice that we sent out is providing an update of that process. And I see Nick Pierce, who's in our permitting department. I think he probably has something to add to that.
Yes. Good evening, everyone. On that best available retrofit control technology workshop is just one of many workshops that we have to review the progress that we've made on our expedited best available retrofit control technology schedule, where as Ryan said, we are reviewing and evaluating several rules to increase their stringency and make sure that they meet best available control technology requirements. And that's all that notification was. I believe it's on April 20th is the workshop. So feel free to attend if you guys want. There's some good information there.
Great, and I think the Air District does try to notify you if a meeting does qualify as an official stipend meeting. Certainly, all the committee meetings, the formal committee meetings do count, but the subcommittee meetings and some of these other workshops are typically not eligible for the stipend. All right, so in the interest of time, I will keep us moving, and we will continue this conversation about conduct by just giving some very specific outlines of what we mean by this, right? So, I want to be acknowledged that a lot of you have serving on steering committees in other categories and in other types. And so the slides that are going to show on the screen are going to be very familiar to many of you. And anytime you get a large group together, this is just one of the things you want to make sure there's clarity around how you might operate together, how you might ensure that everyone gets the most out of this meeting. So on the screen now is a list of considerations and reminders about how to make sure everyone in this virtual meeting has the best experience possible and that we accomplish the goals of this meeting and then the process in general. So we want to, I think, reiterate how important it is for each of you to share your personal truth, but we also want to make sure that we focus on solutions and opportunities that can really deliver the positive change that we want for AB 617. Second is let everyone participate. Step up and step back. You've seen that slide before. Make sure every voice and every perspective is heard and acknowledge that that is valid. And then with a 2-hour meeting, just be mindful of the fact that we don't have a ton of time for everyone, but we do try and give everyone a chance to share the space. Third is civil and respectful. I think we've talked about that, and I add in there empathetic as well, since we all want to certainly be kind. The next one is to stay on point and on time. Keep your comments as brief as you can and allow everyone to participate so we can get to those public comments at the end. And then, of course, making sure that these last two are really important, attacking the problem, not the person, thinking about how you can respectfully challenge ideas and outcomes, but not people, and really honoring every person's humanity and dignity. That's really important. Certainly those of you and those of us that work in the environmental justice or social justice space or any of those others, you know these well, how important it is to honor humanity, and we want to make sure, and dignity, and we want to make sure that we do that here as well. And then moving forward, seeking common ground. Many of the things that we are doing in this committee is identifying consensus, and I have seen in the chat some conversations about how do we achieve that consensus, and let's talk about voting. I want to acknowledge that I do see those comments, and I want to address them at the end of this discussion. But I also want to make sure that we try to achieve consensus building so that in the event of, a vote, we certainly have the opportunity to formally vote. But if we can, we will achieve consensus in other ways as well. And it's always good to find those shared values and that common ground. And I think one thing to consider too is that you're all here because you want to make a difference. You want to improve the air quality in Stockton. You want to improve the health outcomes in Stockton. And remembering that about your CSC members is going to help achieve the best results. And it's certainly not something that you're not comfortable doing. I know you all have that opportunity and you're all here for all the right reasons. So I want to thank you for that. And honestly, thank you for the support that we've already received. And a lot of this is based on the requests of CSC members to think about how we can modify the meeting so that everyone feels like they know what's happening and that they can participate well. Next slide. Additional tips, sharing this personal space, this virtual space. We want to make sure you speak up if you can, because we can't see you. We would love to, in person, we would love for you to keep your cameras on if possible. If we were in person, we'd be able to read your body language, we'd be able to hear your voice, we'd be able to understand how you feel about things. And so we want to try and mirror our in-person meetings as much as possible. So if you can keep your cameras on, we would appreciate that. And then we would also, as we mentioned, like to focus the chat on conversations that are specific to the topic at hand, mostly so that we can make sure that people don't have to divert their attention and they can really engage and we can really get a sense of what's happening in the meeting, and your colleagues on the CSC have the best opportunity to weigh in. So with that in mind, I want to thank those of you that have already modeled this behavior. We started talking about this for the last couple of meetings and we just want to continue it. And we're grateful to all of you for that effort. So why don't I quickly go to this chat where there's a comment about meet agenda items specifically. And I see that there are questions about agendas and voting. The question, I think it was that, Catherine asked, was one about the 50% plus one. It is of the attendees in the meeting. One of the reasons we want to start and end on time is so that we can have the majority of the participation in the meetings. And one of the comments that I'm seeing is that the agenda should identify an action item. Right now on the agenda for this meeting, it flags that there is a potential voting item. That's how the Air District has been noting that. Anytime there is a potential vote on an issue, it's being flagged in that way. Certainly there's an opportunity in a future meeting to talk about what the best approach is moving forward. But there is and have been some key flags we've added to agenda items to make sure people know that votes are taking place. And we do try to meet the timestamps, but we sometimes, get off track, as we are a little bit off track now, but we will make up that time. But that is usually the intent. And again, it is important, and we echo points to make sure that the agendas reflect what you'd like. So maybe now's a good time. What we will do is, if you have additional comments about action items or others, if you echo the comments that are noted in the chat, now's a good time to drop in your support for those potential adjustments to that agenda, and we'll make sure that that gets shared with the Air District as we move forward.
And Erica, I do see a hand from Margot.
Margot.
Hi, I really appreciate the comments. I appreciate the comments on conduct. And I appreciate that Ryan said that people don't really mean to be disrespectful. And I think that's 99% of the time that's true. And I think in this committee, it is true. However, with the emotional issues that are coming up, sometimes people lose track of what they're saying. And normally in a work situation, I would encourage, if someone is feeling disrespected, you pull someone aside and you talk individually. That really isn't an option here. And I think if there is some disrespect going on, if the person who is feeling disrespected can say something respectfully, and or if any of us notice it and want to point it out and say, let's get back on point. I think that's just really, really important. Or if you're able to do it, that would be just really good. But I don't know how comfortable people are with that, but I feel like things have gotten dragged out over time. And then, we spend time dealing with it 3 weeks later, 4 weeks later. So that's all.
Thanks for your comment, Margot. One thing that I can tell you certainly is that, you know, as a facilitator, I certainly am respectful of this discussion. And one of the things I want to commit to do is really not tolerate any of those, you know, personal attacks or any of that. I will call it out, and I will certainly require that everyone on this committee or in these meetings treats everyone else with that level of humanity, that dignity that we talked about. So I'm certainly prepared to really make sure that I defend as needed every single person in this meeting against that kind of treatment from wherever it comes, right? And I think that's certainly my role. And if you feel comfortable flagging for me, even in a private chat, hey, I felt really uncomfortable if you didn't want to say it publicly, that's absolutely something that I can assist with during a meeting. I would then turn it over to the Air District for conversations after the fact, but agree that moving forward, you will maybe see a little bit more discussion from me in the event that that takes place. The first thing that I think we had to do was really acknowledge, here's the expectations, and moving forward, these are those expectations, and then you can act and respond to those and a little bit more appropriately. So you'll see me do that differently moving forward as well. Any other comments? Doesn't look like I see any more hands, so we're going to continue moving. I do want to thank you all for that flexibility while we talked about a really important part of how this committee runs. And then let's move into, now that the housekeeping is done, into where we are in the SERP development process so we can continue with our agenda and get back on track. So on the screens right now is a snapshot of where we are in the SERP development process, and this might be the last time you see this slide. So congratulations on your recent unanimous approval of the SERP by this committee. The Air District Board actually approved the SERP in March, and they offered you, as part of that approval, some flexibility, which you're going to hear about. So in terms of where we are in the process, we're actually concurrently working on 2 boxes today. We're discussing adding a few more measures to the SERP, and we're discussing SERP implementation. So we're doing 2 things concurrently. And as I mentioned, your SERP is already approved by the Air District Board. You're going to get some flexibility to add a few more measures to the SERP if you want to. And there have been a lot of conversations about this and a lot of information shared about this at a recent Air District Board meeting. So I'm actually going to turn off the screen share and pass this to Ryan to set the stage for you all and give everyone an overview of what's transpired since the Air District Board meeting and what kind of the context is for the conversation you're about to have about support and SERP adoption.
Thanks, Erica. I think Jessica has the...
But yeah, do you want me to pull up the slides, Ryan?
Yeah, please. So during the board meeting, and I know you know, we discussed the board measures several times before. During the and leading up to the district governing board meeting where they adopted the Stockton SERP, there were concerns raised by numerous steering committee members that the vote that took place was confusing for people, that you know, some of the issues that why people voted no, with you know the transparency that was discussed, and Jeff talked about the steps that the board have taken, that the board heard those comments, read the comments. We received several letters, including you know some people that had previously voted no on the measures, and wanting to make sure that the final decision from the steering committee could be left no doubt of what the intention of the steering committee, and wanting to you know honor that. And I know that the steering committee you know values making sure that everybody feels like they were heard and that they were understood. And so the district governing board listened to all the feedback, and so based on that, while they adopted the board, they also took additional action to provide you know a window of opportunity to further discuss the board incentive measures and outreach measures, and to see if the steering committee was interested in including those. And so the measures that the governing board felt comfortable having for discussion were the ones that had already previously been discussed. And so what we thought we would do, instead of taking a collective here's the measures, vote yes or no, that we would go through them one at a time and hear from the steering committee on whether or not they want to include them, and let that be the finality of it. And so we were just going to go through the measures and making sure that everybody on the steering committee understands what they would be voting for would be just the individual measure, not a group of measures. And if there's questions about an individual measure, that we could discuss that. I see several hands up.
Okay, we have a few hands up. I'm going to take them in order, and I'll start with Robin, then go to Gloria, and then to Irene.
Yes, I think it would behoove the steering committee also to put these port measures in context with the port expansion. I don't think we should talk about funding the port while knowing that they're going to expand, and that is definitely going to impact the mitigation of air pollution. So I think that's also a level of concern for a lot of the residents. So I don't know if Jeff is going to talk about that later, but I think that's a really important thing to talk about if we're going to talk about the port measures.
Thank you, Robin. Gloria, you're next, and then Anthony, I see your hand as well.
My question just relates more to the bullet point number, the second bullet point, which is, I think it will be really important and crucial to know which community, how many community members expressed confusion in regards to this continuous discussion on the port. It will make things more relevant to us.
Yeah, and some of the letters we received were from groups, and so it was groups and individuals. I apologize, Gloria, I don't have the number handy, but I mean it was yeah. I don't want to misstate, and we could double check and get that.
Thanks, Gloria. Irene, I see your hand, and then Anthony.
Yeah, I think my question is like opening up and discussing the port measures again seems to kind of overturn a vote. So I don't know if even before going into that there should be another vote on whether to open it up again to honor like just everyone being here, and not everyone knew this had taken place in between. So I think that if the port is to come back again and be discussed, that it would need to be revoted. I think just to confirm that there is a majority that wants that.
Yes, this is absolutely an opportunity for you to review and discuss this or vote on it or not. Yeah, so you do have that flexibility today. I'm certainly going to go to Anthony, and then we'll loop back with the Air District for how they'd like to move forward. Anthony.
Yeah, again, I'm a little frustrated at this meeting on why we need to have it. We voted and we said the port does not get any money. The port has not been a good neighbor. It's been an awful neighbor. And this little Band-Aid money that they have to do to fix our, to help with the air quality, to me is, if you're gonna throw money at it, throw money at it. This is not enough. And the port has poisoned our lungs for decades. And now, to me, they're looking for a handout. And I'm not okay with that. We voted last time. I want that vote to stay. Thank you.
Thanks, Anthony. Catherine, I see your hand.
Yeah, thank you, Erica. So I wasn't able to attend the Valley Air District Governing Board meeting, but I did watch the recording of it last night, and I would like to dispute the characterization that there are numerous groups that want to overturn the vote. Central Valley Air Quality Coalition staff, my alternate Cynthia, was there to express that we are very confident in the vote that we took, and there were also several other organizations that spoke. I'm really disappointed to hear that there are groups and individuals that are confused. And I feel like we're continuing to undermine the integrity of our process and making sure that we are moving forward community priorities. I think words are being twisted and there's misrepresentation of who speaks for community members and who speaks for community groups. And if this is just a process where we're handing out money to industry to subsidize their expanding their emissions, then that's not something that CVAC can be in support of. And we've been very clear and transparent on that position from the get-go. So I think the port needs to account for their expansion, and they need to answer the questions that we've consistently asked from the beginning. Absent of that, we need to move on from this conversation, in my opinion.
Thank you for that comment, Catherine. I see Stacy's hand. And then one of the things that I will do in the spirit of acknowledging that it has been a month since the last meeting, I do think there might be an update from the port. I want to make sure the committee comes with the full understanding of any updates that have taken place on the port's behalf since the last meeting. So we'll turn it actually over to a port representative after we hear from Stacy to see if anything has changed since your last vote. Stacy.
Yes, thank you, Erica. I voted no because, I don't feel comfortable funding an organization, that plans to expand and severely pollute our area. Why isn't our vote why isn't our vote being honored? This is very frustrating.
Thanks for that comment, Stacy. I see Dylan's hand, and then we will go to our port representative. Thank you, Dylan.
Sure, thanks for letting me speak. Yeah, I just want to kind of review CARB's letter regarding the draft EIR of the Port of Stockton, just to remind everyone where we're at. The plans of the port is to increase bulk vessels coming into terminal from 9 in the baseline year of 2018 to 48 a year. The number of barge visits would increase from 0 to 40. The annual truck calls would increase from a 2018 baseline of 18,720 to an expected maximum of 42,500. Annual rail cars would increase from 587 to an expected maximum of 4,762. And annual rail trips would increase from 117 to 238. I think the Little Manila made its vote based on the sum of what's going to happen. And so, end of the day, it feels like giving the port money while they're at the table, while they're planning on expanding pollution, feels like any money given by this committee would be subsidizing their expansion. I mean, that's what it feels like. And that just doesn't, sit well. Why would we give the largest polluter in Stockton that plans to expand their pollution more money? And so I just want to make things clear that Little Manila did not, that's the reason why we voted no. We'd like to create pathways to mitigate all that stuff, but until there are plans presented that mitigates over 20,000 more trucks, why should we give you $1?
Thanks for that comment, Dylan. I do want to give the port an opportunity to talk about anything that has changed since the last meeting to make sure that you're operating with the most updated information. And since the port is on the call today, let's hear a little bit from them about what has changed, if anything, since that last conversation and since that last vote, and then we'll proceed.
Dylan, you were referencing a document from 2018. Can you just help me understand what you're referencing?
There were 3 letters that were written by CARB. So I'll ask CARB to confirm the letters. There was a letter written in January in response to the Port of Stockton's, I forgot the pre-part of the environmental impact report. And then there's another one in July responding to the draft environmental impact report stating or updating numbers regarding what the port's EIR is saying is going to be as far as pollution expansion. And then there's another letter in August from CARB to the port director, specifically asking the port to work with community quickly, because they believe there were measures being taken to work towards port expansion, and that port expansion should be included in the discussion around AB 617. And so that's kind of where, as far as the residents that we've been working with, that's like the context of where we're coming from.
Okay, I don't know which project specific. I mean, the port, since we took over Rough and Ready Island.
The Lehigh project.
Oh, the Lehigh project?
And another, there's like a total of 23 projects. I think Scott could maybe clarify their letter.
So the port's been developing Rough and Ready Island since early 2000, when it was transferred from the Navy to the Port of Stockton to create jobs and economic activity for the area. So we've got, of that 1,400 acres, I want to say there are 200 or 300, maybe 300 or 400 acres left that have not been developed. Most of it was already, warehousing, and so we've utilized those warehouses and things. Jonathan says Lehigh and New Star. I don't understand those trucking numbers. I know that the 47,000 initially was what was put in the EIR for the redevelopment of Rough and Ready Island. That number was extremely exaggerated. We're nowhere even close to that. I mean, I can get a recent truck count, but our goal is to develop whatever we have left in the most efficient, effective way, and working with you. I mean, that's why we want to establish the outreach committee. So we want to get your input on cargoes and projects and the equipment that we go after and how we budget for going after cleaner equipment or for improvements around the port, tree planting measures, things like that. So it's, I would not say that you're subsidizing the port's expansion to any degree. The port would probably not even own any of the equipment that we're talking about here in this process. We have tug companies. The port itself does not have that much equipment. It's mostly our tenants, our 130 some tenants, and then contractors and companies like the tug companies and our railroad, Central California Traction Company. So I don't know if that answers your question. It probably doesn't, but I can get you updated numbers on whether it's the trucking numbers, and we are really pushing for projects to move away from bringing in additional trucks.
Thanks, Jeffrey. And I'm going to ask Scott to weigh in, because I know there's some comments about CARB and there's a lot of comments in the chat. But I do also want to make sure to ask if there's anything additional that has been updated or changed since the last conversation that you all had at the last CSC meeting. Is there anything that you can report from the port position, whether it's with your commissioner or others, that's relevant for this conversation today? And I'll ask Scott to jump in, because I know they were talking about CARB. So I want to give Scott a chance to weigh in.
Yeah, actually, good evening. Scott Wall with the California Air Resources Board. Most of my comment was going to be that it looks like there were several questions about where the letters are and all of that. So I just want to let you know that it does look like Honjuro has dropped in a link to our webpage where the letters reside. So that all of the CEQA comment letters that we write actually are linked in the chat. And I see a couple of folks actually have copied and pasted text. We do actually have with us this evening, I asked one of our CEQA kind of gurus, if you will, at the Air Resources Board to join us for the meeting this evening. there has been a comment letter or two that I've actually written to the port that I leaned heavily on him. And then he has actually been personally responsible for several of the other CEQA letters that are posted out there as well. So I just want to let you all know that Stanley Armstrong is with us this evening and would be able to kind of, I guess, help address any questions about process or kind of authorities or things of that nature. So just wanted to just make you aware that he was here, but most of my comments that I was going to make, people have addressed in the chat.
Perfect. Thank you. I think I will go back to Jeff. Is there anything additional that we want to discuss related to what has transpired in the last few weeks since the last CSC vote and discussion about these measures?
Are you asking me?
Yes, Jeff, thank you.
I will just say, I did get a chance to update the board. They asked me to continue attending and to report back. Yeah, they trust my ability, I guess, to report back accurately, and they've also indicated that, even if a commissioner were to come to the meeting, just one of the commissioners couldn't make any commitments to the port for the port board as well. And so what they've asked me to do is to attend the meetings, report back to them, and then they will respond.
Thank you for that, Jeff. So I just want to acknowledge that I see hands from Debbie, Douglas, Mary Elizabeth, Jonathan, and Taylor and Margot. So it's a lot of hands. And then I just want to provide one clarifying comment. I mentioned this at the beginning, but I want to make sure that it is clear. There is no requirement that we re-vote on these port measures or to change or to continue the discussion about whether to include them in the SERP. I think that the Air District Governing Board wanted to provide you that opportunity based on some of the feedback they've received in writing and at the meeting, but there is no requirement today that that be taken up again in a formal way. So if there is a consensus not to re-vote or not to include those measures, that certainly is an option. I do want to acknowledge, though, that there are 4 or 5 people that have a question or comment about this. And if anybody that was in favor of readdressing these conversations, I do want to welcome your input and your feedback on that now to make sure that you have a chance to have your voice heard as well. So in order, I will take Debbie and then Douglas and then Mary Elizabeth.
I just want to say that we all just have one vote, whether it be a organization, a person that lives in the area, or someone else that is voting. I'm not sure who else is voting actually, but we all just have one vote. So I think we need to use it wisely. And some of us were very disappointed that it seemed that there was some discussion among a certain group, or it seemed like the nonprofits got together before the meeting last week and got together and made a decision to vote against anything for the port. And I just want to say, for someone that's had the Brown Act training, every year I get it whether I want it or not, because I'm on another board and I have an attorney that runs that board. He's very diligent. That is against the Brown rules, to have meetings with yourselves about things behind the scenes. Can't do that, guys. So it's really important not to do that. It's totally against the law. But it seemed that happened last month, when that vote, before that vote was taken. So I just want to say that I think it is in good measure that maybe we do take a look at this. However, it does concern me that a vote is a vote. But because of the background that I saw that maybe there was a violation of the Brown Act prior to that meeting, that some of the nonprofits got together somehow, that I think we need to revisit this.
Thanks for that comment, Debbie.
Thank you.
I do want to make a comment or two just as a point of order. While Debbie is accurate that if this were a Brown Act committee that would be in violation, this is not technically a Brown Act obligated committee. The charter does not call for that. And so we aren't certainly under those same obligations, but as Ryan did mention earlier in the conversation today, that's not a practice we would appreciate moving forward, that we want to make sure that all the committee members are able to hear from the Air District about anything of committee business and that there are no side conversations. So I did want to acknowledge that, Debbie, that you are correct, that will be changed moving forward, but also that acknowledge that this is not a formal Brown Act committee. Douglas, I see your hand.
Oh, star six. Star six.
Star six to get.
Hello, yes. One thing I want to talk to Jeffrey about is that recently before I need some clarification because I was really confused when we had the vote, when we're going to go and vote a certain item. He was adamant about, oh, don't worry about it. We'll get our thing somewhere. We'll get our money somewhere. So I didn't quite understand what he meant by that, and that's what got me a little confused by. And I don't understand how the Port of Stockton are subsidizing some contractor when they have with $3 million. It's not going to be for them, but for the subcontractor. For me, I live right by the Delta, and Jonathan knows that. Right by that area stink. You know, you get the Hyatt, you get the thing, and yet you guys have nothing. You have no equipment. You have nothing to really contribute any, but setting contract and service within the city in your organization. So what element of money that you need $3 million for something that you're not gonna able to keep, but yet still throwing money away to other individual contracts that do your service for us in the city of Stockton. You guys should be able to do their work for us. You're the Port of Stockton. You're the main. People they brag about you. People talk about, I even go take a trip and I say, oh, the Port of Stockton got money and this and that, but yet you don't do anything. You just subcontract. My concern is that you at least have one equipment to clear the Hyatt, one equipment that's owned by you guys for that particular reason. For $3 million, to me, it's a waste of money. It's ridiculous. And I understand the frustration that Dylan and other people are concerned about, because the $3 million ain't going to be for you guys, for the other, the middleman that's going to be getting the portion. And what are you guys going to be getting the money for? That's my question, Jeff. So please collaborate what you're going to need that money for that money. That's all. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Douglas.
Do you want
Go
me to
ahead, Jeff, if you have a response.
Okay, Douglas, I was just going to say that you know, this money was and this whole process is about reducing emissions, and it was, I think, the CSC that identified the port as a potential, you know, as a serious source of emissions. And so, while we are making efforts and we are doing a lot of cleanup, and were you speaking specifically of the hyacinth, the water hyacinth? Sorry.
Star six.
You're
Star
muted.
6, Douglas. Douglas. Oh,
You're muted.
Well, my point is that I'm just looking at the high at the sound, but the machine that but I'm talking about all machine that equipment that you use for trucking, for the towing, forklifting. It could be anything that you don't even own, those type of equipment. So what equipment do you actually own that the people are saying that you're polluting? What are you polluting? There's a lot of pollution. I see a bunch of air smoke coming out of those pipes. I see it every day in front of my house right there. Is that steam? Is that gas? Is that smoke? I don't know what it is that's smoking coming out of those pipes every day. So that's my concern. But my concern about the equipment that you don't actually own. What money what you have to keep to own those type of equipment instead of giving out to contractor and cleaning it partial, part-time, and whatever. You know what I mean? That's all. Thank you. For clarification.
Sure. So the what you see that is steam that's coming out of the DTE facility. They're a biomass electrical generator. They actually sell to PG&E as part of their green profile. So we have most of the equipment that the port has is cargo handling equipment like forklifts, payloaders, a couple bulldozers. We've got some rail car movers. That's pretty much the extent of what we own, and we're making great strides in taking out our older diesel polluting equipment and replacing it with now we've got 35 zero emission heavy duty forklifts and a rail car mover. And so we have been making strides. And you talk about the Hyacinth, we went out there with our own money to try to clean the waterway, because not only was it affecting our shipping, but it was also affecting downtown. And so we hired a contractor and sent them downtown to try to clean up all that stuff, because it not only absorbs all the water, it creates habitat for mosquitoes. It's awful. And so we have actually been leading the effort on the water hyacinth removal. I'm now really close with Department of Boating and Waterways and others. In fact, I even got in trouble from U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service for harvesting hyacinth without a permit. And so we worked it out to where we can be covered under Department of Boating and Waterways, but Boating and Waterways came to us to look for places that they could put the material after they saw us out there mechanically removing it. And we could have gone bankrupt just if we kept on mechanically removing it. So we did as much as we possibly could. And then we turned it back over to Boating and Waterways, and thankfully they've got it under control. We were doing the same thing with the harmful algal blooms. We've got an aerator facility at the port that really was designed for dissolved oxygen. This summer, I turned it on for a month to try to get some of the striation and the water layers to mix, to break up some of the algae and not make it such a good environment for that to grow. And we're partnering with others who are putting together grant applications to come and study ways that we can clean up or get rid of the algal blooms. And so we're involved. We're not out there all the time waving our flag, but we are involved in almost every aspect of everything that you mentioned. And in a lot of areas when it's not our responsibility, but our board has kind of pushed us to go beyond kind of what's been required by environmental agencies and to find good projects and measures that improve the livability of Stockton. So I'm sure there's a lot more than that, but that's just off the top of my head.
Thank you, Jeff. And I do want to acknowledge, I think there's even a comment in the chat that, Jeff comes to these meetings and gets beat up sometimes. And, in the spirit of the conversation and the kindness with which we want to acknowledge that you are representing the port, and there's been certainly some history that these steering committee members have have shared with you, and that you've been very gracious in accepting that feedback. And so I do want to acknowledge that and flag that there are some comments in the chat acknowledging that as well, and thanking you for your participation. Despite that, it's never an easy meeting when we talk about the port. I do want also to acknowledge, I see Mary Elizabeth, Jonathan, and Taylor, and Margot in that order. And I also see a couple other questions for Jeffrey in the chat. In the interest of time, what I actually am going to ask, if we can, is if you, Jeff, keep a note of the questions, and we're going to take everybody in a running order so that you can then just come up one more time and answer any questions that they might have. So Mary Elizabeth, do you have a comment? If all of you have comments for Jeffrey, I'm going to ask you all to go back to back to back, and then we'll bring Jeffrey up to answer them.
Thank you. So I initially raised my hand because I was definitely interested in those truck numbers and information about traffic flow in general, as you might have guessed. I did want to talk a little bit about some port outreach efforts, and I am a regular person that goes to the Port of Stockton meetings, and I'm one of those people that regularly provide comments. And that's the means by which, you know, people have opportunity to address governing bodies. Next, the development is underway for a strategic plan, and I know that many organizations here have interacted with the consultant that the Port of Stockton has hired to develop that plan. And while we haven't seen what that plan has to say, we did have an opportunity at least for input. Next, in regards to a recent meeting that was Monday, the port read all of the comment letters, every single one of the comment letters that was received on every single item. And so that was a big issue, you know, because the commissioners, you know, were not reading the letters, and while they were reading them, they weren't reading them aloud so that those that are participating in the meeting can hear what was being said. And so I would like to say that, you know, praise be it that those commissioners have committed to reading comments. Next, I was contacted by in regards to the expansion, I was contacted by a company that is handling soda ash, and evidently that company has been in contact with several other environmental organizations, and I was referred, my name was referred by them. And so this company here, I believe, according to my interactions with DTSC, is related to the Rough and Ready Island and the rail expansion that is going to be headed out there, the hardening project that is going to be underway to transfer that. And I believe, you know, Jeff can correct me, but that effort is not going to be served by trucks, that is primarily going to be a rail effort. And so part of that last bit of expansion that he was talking about. And then finally, you know, there is the port commissioner were notified about this outreach plan at the meeting, and they expressed what did I say? That they wanted Jeff to continue to represent them. And they stated that right at the meeting. And so, you know, just for some updates, you know, I wanted to make sure that, you know, you all were apprised at that. And, you know, I've been working with the port nearing on 2 years, and my commitment to my community and to a better environment for the people of Stockton. And there has been progress made. Quite a bit. and within the last year. And so I want to echo, some, for those of you that did go to the meeting or did watch the video, that
means your money, get off the thing.
That the commission, or that the air board, they really wanted to, help with reducing emissions. And right now, the port operations and their tenants, represent a major source of emissions. And so if we're not, focusing our efforts on reducing those emissions, then they were concerned that we were missing out on opportunities to really improve our air quality. And so I want to just leave it with that, and that Jeff, you might consider giving public briefings at the commission, during the commission meetings, to outline some of these extra environmental issues and how they relate to the concerns of the community, to give a regular presentation to the board in a public forum. Thank you.
Thanks for that comment, Mary Elizabeth. And I do want to acknowledge, I see hands from Jonathan, Taylor, and Margot. But before I go to those people, I do want to try and really get a sense of where the committee is standing on this, given the time in this agenda. I do realize that there is the option certainly to take a vote. As I mentioned, the Air District Board isn't requiring that or even suggesting that you reverse a vote, but just that you have the opportunity to have this conversation. So if you feel strongly that you would like to reconsider that discussion item, feel free to put it in the chat, put in a note in the chat, and I will try and review that to get a sense of how people are feeling. Right now, the majority of people are feeling, based on what I've heard, are feeling as though this might not be necessary to do a revote, but I'd like to make sure that I really do understand and hear from the entire committee that's on the line today. So in order, Jonathan, Taylor, and Margot, back to back if we can. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. I'm really just gonna be transparent. Yeah, I apologize for, how terrible that I've been. Catholic Charities has tried to, unfortunately we hadn't had a lot of chance to really share of information on what we were trying to do for our letter that we're trying to send out. I know we did vote no onto the thing. We were part of the 19. It was 10 to 19. I was a little confused, and unfortunately, I'm going to be totally honest. I wasn't 100% there because I was doing 2 meetings at the same time. I had a meeting with Santa Clara students. They had their They had their Santa Clara poster presentation for their project, and no one was there to they needed someone there from Catholic Charities to be there, since we are working with the students, and I did have to attend. So I do apologize. That is my fault. It will never happen again. Second, when it comes to the communications with the Port of Stockton and Catholic Charities, the only time I've ever had conversations with the Port of Stockton has been about making sure that the CEC that they were trying to develop, at first I talked about the Environmental Justice Task Force. That was a word that I came up with. It wasn't something the Port of Stockton came up with. I want to make it clear. I came up with it in July of 2020 because I knew it was very important that, when I was with Mary Elizabeth to the meetings, it was an absolute mess. The fact that they didn't read comments was just an absolute mess. And I said, this needs to change. There needs to be transparency. And Jeff, we need to get the CAC together on this. We had only 2 meetings to discuss what are the steps to get people included on this sort of task force. I says, going forward, we need to make sure people are attending these things. That was my only conversations with Jeff on that. Then, of course, what happened with the voting, that was of last month. Yes, we said no. I said no. But then, of course, in our letter, it was a little bit different. In the letter, the reason why I changed our letter to say we'd like to bring back the port air measures. And the only reason why was because when we had a conversation with the CVAC, it was with CVAC having with the conversations with Air District Governing Board, Dr. Sheriffs and Pachinko Warner. It was made clear that they were not, unfortunately, they didn't believe it was going to be something to bring back to the table if we brought it to the governing board, that they would give us a chance to increase, to allow us to bring it back. Like they vote on, yes, what we want, what we have so far, but then we can come as a CSC and bring that back as an amendment for the port ed measures. They both said it's pretty much going to be impossible. And so when I heard that, I thought, unfortunately, it puts us at a disadvantage, because the reason why I think the air measures would have been good for the port air measures was because the community would have leverage on the funding and how the funding would go for the port. It wouldn't be where the port automatically got the funding. It would literally have to go to where the port would have to apply for the incentive, similar to like a grant. They would have to apply for the application, and the CAC would have to look and watch carefully over on that application. And of course, in addition to what the Port of Stockton applying for those incentive grants, is also the CEC that they were trying to develop, and that was going to happen at the same time. So that was the reason why, Catholic Charities voted on that. But as I see right now, I'm going to rescind on what we said in our letter, because I feel like it's just way too hot. I feel like we're not getting it clear. And so I'm going to say, on behalf of Catholic Charities, I believe we should just continue what we have on our CERP so far, continue the conversation with the port on the side of AB 617, and then hopefully down the road, we see the Port of Stockton coming together with us to find other additional funding down the road that's outside of AB 617. Thank you.
Thanks for that update and that kind of background, Jonathan. Appreciate that. And I think the committee will certainly give you some grace. We understand how multiple meetings happen, and it's important to be able to change our perspective as needed. I see Taylor and Margot. Taylor next, and then Margot, and then we'll turn it over to Jeff for a final kind of comment on behalf of the port, and then we'll move forward on this topic.
Thanks, Erica. Yeah, I have a question for Jeff as well. So Jeff, you mentioned the commissioners trust you to get to these meetings and report back. And I do appreciate you being here, Jeff. Last meeting, we presented to you very specific conditions we would like to include in the CERP in order to include incentive funding for the port. And you said that you would probably need about a week to get an answer. Given the last commission meeting happened this past Monday, as Mary Elizabeth mentioned, how did commissioners respond when you raised those specific conditions to them? And the second question is actually for the Air District. Why haven't we framed this discussion based on a set of conditions that have already been approved by a supermajority of the CSC? Thanks.
Thanks. And then Margot, we'll take your question, and then we'll have the Air District and port response.
I have a little different, I'm coming from a little bit different direction, because I really think, I think it's unfortunate that even at the Valley Air Board, our people's vote was characterized as confused. I don't think people were confused. I think people were angry. And I understand that. The letter that was pulled together, that wouldn't go through, asking the port to participate in certain ways, was trying to get more transparency, trying to get more community input, trying to move things along, not with a kind of little committee that's out there, but a real functional committee that hopefully this CEC will be. And it couldn't, the transparency couldn't happen. Nobody could commit. It was, it was a Hail Mary kind of thing. It was a last ditch effort. And I think the vote was really, really unfortunate. It was after hours. It was late. People were angry. People were tired. And I really think we need to hear why people are opposed to this money. I mean, we don't want the port, who is a profit-making company, getting our money. Well, if they don't get it, nobody gets it. Not here anyway. And I'm not sure why we want to not control more pollution. At the same time, you need a lot of time for people to give their reasons and to really think it through and mull it over. I see what Jeff has proposed in terms of the CEC committee. It's moving along. I don't think it's quite there yet. At the same time, I thought the thing from Valley Air on the P1 collaborating comments, I think they were a touch stronger. The problem is we don't have any strength there, and that's what we wanted. But do we really want to not eliminate some pollution? Do we really not want to do that? I think if we say, yeah, we really don't want to do that, so be it. But that is defeats the whole purpose of this committee. At the same time, I'm sorry, everything we do feels so small compared to the big problem that it is a little overwhelming. So that's all I have to say. I would like to see us revote. I would like to see us have enough time to vote and ask, and I would like people to share their reasons if they're open for it. And hopefully not be done in anger or resentment or anything other than what's going to work best for our community. I signed on to the letter initially, by the way, I really did. And at the same time, I did a yes vote on that night because I just really feel that this is really concerning. I appreciate that we have more time and that we hopefully can see if the port can really start to work together with the community, truly start to work together, not just so maybe. Thank you.
Thanks for that comment, Margot. And I do want to acknowledge and thank everyone that has dropped comments into the chat. There are 3 to 4 residents that have identified, primarily residents that have identified that they are interested in a revote. But with others that are saying, and in terms of our consensus and 50% plus one, it doesn't look like we have the full support of this committee if we were to take a vote to do a revote. And I want to acknowledge that and give anybody a chance at the last minute to weigh in here if you haven't yet in the chat to make sure that I'm reading that correctly. I also want to make sure that I give a chance for Jeff and Ryan to respond to a couple comments and questions about funding and accountability and really close us out on this issue in the interest of time, because we do have one other topic we want to cover related to the camp. So I will go to whoever's ready first, Ryan or Jeff. Ryan, I see your hand, and I know there's a question directly directed at you as it relates to funding. Maybe you can fill us in on that.
Yeah, I can touch on both. And so to touch on what Taylor talked about, why we're discussing a vote. I give a lot of credit to our governing board wanting to you respect the process, and so when they presented it, it wasn't that it would be a simple majority that there'd be including of measures. I mean, it had to be consensus on that. And so what we're hearing tonight is absolutely that we do not have consensus, and I hear comments from some of the resident steering committee members about the concerns of not including those measures, but this is a community steering committee, and we have to abide by what the desires of the committee as a whole. And so at this point, with the direction that we were given by our governing board, we don't have consensus to include those measures, and so there wouldn't be a need to hold a vote. The other question was the reserve of the $5 million. That was only for those measures associated with the port. So at that point, that money would not be available for reallocation. So.
Thanks for clarifying that, Ryan. And then I'll turn it over to Jeff, and then I see Mariah's hand, and that will be our last comment on this issue.
Okay, I got to go a long way back here. Um,
I'm sorry about that, Jeff.
It's all right. To respond to somebody about the Lehigh project, that project is being rescoped and it will be recirculated again sometime in the near future. I don't know exactly when, but that project has kind of been pulled back and reworked. And so there'll be more to come on that. And I'm sure that's be something that we can talk about in the outreach group. Oh, what else do we got? Strategic plan. Thank you, Mary, for bringing that up. I mean, I think that I think the port has kind of shown. I mean, whether it's through the strategic plan and the Denmark project or whatever it is, you know, we're telling the people that we're working with, hey, we need to get input from these specific groups, and we've reached out. You know, I don't know when the strategic plan, they're trying to get it out by this summer. I think that's a little bit ambitious, but I think we've shown so far that we're sticking by what we've said. And I would just say also, as far as the funding for the port, I mean, I would have to go to my board. I've got to go to the board and ask them if, let's say for the marine exhaust, you know, the port has got to put money into that as well. Well beyond when we would have. So we'll be spending millions of dollars, you know, which is a lot to us. You know, I think that there's been a lot of comments tonight saying, hey, you know, the port's got all this money and we don't have a lot of money. We're not a big port. You know, we were down to our last nickel in 2009. I mean, we were seriously scraping the bottom of the barrel to make payroll. Since then, the board's been a little bit more conservative and wanting to have more days of cash. And so they've implemented a policy. So we've got a little bit more reserves than normal, but we have enough to get by. We are not swimming in money. We've got a small staff that does a lot of things. And when I come here to be involved with this, you know, it's about my 6th job. And I'm not trying to get sympathy, but, you know, these things and, you know, things take us a while because we're tasked. I mean, we've got a port to run. We've got 130 tenants that we have to inspect. We've got to be out there making sure that they don't have dust going all over the place and their stormwater is as clean as it can be. So we have serious responsibilities and programs and projects. You know, we've got a wetland project that we got a grant for to modify a stormwater ditch that's concrete lined into a beautiful, you know, what we hope will be a real benefit to wildlife and to the area. But those are the projects we're working on all the time. I mean, and those projects don't come easy. And then we've got to stay in compliance, and we've got, you know, all the agencies that we've got to report to and meet with. And so I'm saying it's you know, it's not a lot of money, I guess, but it's also it's enough to incentivize the port to put in these measures sooner than we would have had to. And in that instance, we're reducing emissions for the community. And that's, as I've said since I started this, I'm not here to ask for money or to get money. I honestly, I mean, I think it'd be great if we could utilize this funding to get additional emissions at the port. But, you know, I've said before that we will continue. We've started down this path and we're committed to it, and we will continue. It just, we won't be able to do it as quickly as we could if we receive some of the funding from the AB 617 group. So.
Thank you, Jeff, for that comment and those responses to a number of questions and comments. There is one comment about funding that I do want to flag for the Air District to write into the chat related to Arlene. And I think CARB is weighing in about funding for, if the port funding does not get assigned to this SERP, does it go back into a larger pot? I think that's being answered in the chat, and I want to acknowledge that comment. As I mentioned, we do not seem to have full group consensus on taking a revote, which means that the current vote will stand. And I don't see anything that would change that in terms of the numbers from the chat that I'm receiving and from the comments I've heard. I do want to close out the comment, this topic with Mariah, and acknowledge that we do have another measured or conversation to discuss about the camp committee. So let's move to Mariah and then move on with the agenda.
Thank you, Erica. And I just want to point out that, you know, when we approved the committee charter way back last year, it's very clear about voting. And I think that if we're going to be a stickler for rules, that's the charter, right? That's the main thing that we focus on. And I just feel like there have been some comments made by multiple people. I'm not pointing fingers at anyone. It's not like an agency person. It's not a CSC member, that there wasn't enough conversation, and a lot of that came out of anger. And I think that dismissing some of the groups, like they're addressing community trauma and not, you know, saying that for the reason why they're voting no, that is a valid reason. And we did talk a lot about that. So to dismiss that is not fair to this committee when these are people who are representing residents. Maybe they're not a part of, you know, this steering committee, but those reasons are just as valid as, you know, data and numbers. And I think that that should be respected just as much as any other opinion. So I'm going to go ahead and stop there because I know we have other things, but just it's really unfortunate that people who are residents are not taking, you know, maybe other residents who don't live in the same area as them or have the same socioeconomic status as them. They're not taking those concerns as seriously. So thanks.
Thanks for that comment, Ryan. I think it's heartfelt in the context of the challenge that we all deal with in not only this virtual environment, but in understanding where every person is coming from and the space with which they're bringing their feedback. And hopefully you all have had the opportunity to weigh in on this issue. Even if you don't necessarily agree with the way that it went down, you had the chance to speak your mind and to talk about your position and your perspective and know that it is valued. There are a lot of very interesting and important comments in the chat. I encourage you to look at those. From what I gathered and from what I see at this time, we do not have the consensus to do the revote, as I mentioned. So the current vote, which was given at the last CSC meeting, will stand. And we want to acknowledge that that the process is sound. It absolutely is, but it's also a community-driven process, and you're all allowed to change your mind. So I did want to make sure that you have that flexibility moving forward. And I think the Air District Board wanted to give you the option, but certainly not the mandate to make any adjustments. I see Dylan's hand. Dylan, you're killing me. All right, Dylan, come on in. Come on in. You'll be our very last thought. And then I will ask Grace from John, who is going to talk about the camp. John, thank you for being patient. Dylan, you close us out, please.
Sure, I apologize.
No, that's okay. This is important.
Yeah, I just want to restate, because I do understand where everyone's coming from, but I need you to understand where I'm coming from. We're an organization that's involved in historic preservation. Our co-founder died of an asthma attack. She grew up next to I-5 because PM 2.5, she got asthma. She died at the age of 46 in 2018. That's what brought us here. The Crosstown Freeway was built through Little Manila, destroying Little Manila. It was built to connect to the Port of Stockton. From our point of view, no one has profited more from the poor health of South Stockton and Central Stockton residents than the Port of Stockton and its tenants. I understand that this money will create some gains to kind of mitigate some of the pollution, but understanding that the plans and the data that we have says that they plan to increase it more, equates in my mind saying that the solution that we're looking at is to fund the entity, the land that is creating the most pollution in Stockton, with plans to create more pollution. That the right thing to do is to give them money. I think they've already profited enough, and I think if they really want to make a difference, Lehigh and all these other folks that want to expand and continue to profit on the poor health and the deaths of people in South Stockton need to put up their own money. And And we are willing to sacrifice $5 million to make that statement, to make that stand. I'm a former Catholic youth minister. I've read the Pope's doctrine regarding climate change and the environment. And this is how I interpret it. I, with my own being, cannot vote for this unless there's a clear path to mitigate all of the pollution, just even in one more truck, right? Like until there's a total actual plan to create less emissions rather than more, a sum of more emissions, it's difficult for us to say yes. And that's all I'm saying. I just hope people understand where we're coming from. I understand where you're coming from. And I don't hold any animosity. I just want you to understand where we're coming from. That's all.
Dylan, that was a really powerful testimony. Thank you so much for sharing it with this team. I think there's a lot of support for your words and for your experience in the chat. And I just, want to thank you for being really, really thoughtful about that. And all of you for having this conversation. I think it was done in a really, really good way. It was done in a respectful way. It was done in a way that was productive. And it's hard, right? This is hard work. You guys are making some really important decisions. We won't always agree as a committee, but I think you really modeled the way that this can be done in the future and moving forward. And it was a tough meeting, but I think a good one. So we are going to move off of this item without making a vote, given that I don't see the consensus for changing the vote that was already decided on and was included in the discussion about the SERP with the Air District Board meeting. And we are going to move on to another topic today. And I want to just, before we close out that item, thank everyone for the conversation that was just had. It was a really long one. It was robust, but it was really heartfelt. And I think it helped center all of us. And hopefully we understand as a committee that everyone is coming with good intentions here. And I think we saw that today. And I really appreciate that tonight and respect all of those, the feedback we received. So moving on, I want to ask John to come up and talk about the potential location of community air monitoring equipment. I think this is going to be a little faster item than we thought, so we should still end on time. And this is, while he's getting set up, this is related to the subcommittee that's been moving and working with John and Chai related to air monitoring equipment locations. So you're going to hear a little bit about what they've identified as options and see if those recommendations work with the committee's blessing. John, take it away.
All right, thank you, Erica. And hi, everybody, I'm John Klassen with the Air District, and happy to be here to give you an update on what we've discussed recently at some subcommittee meetings related to the community air monitoring plan for Stockton. So just a little bit of background again, for those of you who have not been involved in those meetings. This goes about a year ago when we first started talking about air monitoring for Stockton, where we looked at what this could look like. We talked about sources of concern, where those were located, how that could be tied into different recommendations the committee had on where air monitoring could be placed throughout the community. And that led to us drafting the camp document, getting some equipment ready to go. And then eventually that led to us having a couple of subcommittee meetings, which a number of you have been involved in over the past couple of months, which we really appreciate. Thanks to all of you who've been on those subcommittee meetings, where we focused our time to look specifically at in each air monitoring zone where we wanted to place equipment, where should the equipment be placed? Specifically, which schools do we want to place it at, since schools are a great location to place our monitoring equipment. And so the last couple of meetings, we've had some great recommendations from the subcommittee. I'm going to share my screen here so we can all see what I'm talking about. And hopefully you've had a chance to take a look at this. This was in the notes for the subcommittee meeting. This went out along with the agenda for tonight's meeting. And there's a number of notes in here above here for the different sections that were discussed of where air monitoring could be placed. But eventually, through the couple of meetings that we've had, the subcommittee came up with these recommendations on where equipment could be placed for the Stockton community. And just, I won't go over this in a lot of detail, but many of you were at these meetings already. But in essence, this is the design of what we want to work with the subcommittee is recommending, where we would place equipment at a number of schools across the Stockton community. And those include Victory Elementary, Washington Elementary, Hazleton and Taylor Elementary Schools, Taft Elementary, Roosevelt Elementary, and the Merlot Institute of Environmental Technology. So this is the approach that the subcommittee is recommending. We think this will work really well. We've already had some conversations with Stockton Unified about the logistics of this. So if we're going to do this, and they're on board to work with us. And so this is something that we can implement here right away and start taking the steps to get this equipment out there, to start running this equipment, collecting a lot of good real-time data and making that available to the residents of the Stockton community. So we wanted to bring that back to the full committee here to give you an update on what we've discussed over these past couple of meetings, and hope to have consensus from the full committee here that we can go ahead and move forward with working with Stockton Unified in these schools to get this equipment in place and begin operating, so we can have this really valuable data available to the community. That's it for my update.
Thank you, John. So we'll leave this on the screen for you all to review briefly. This is the subcommittee's recommendation for where the air monitoring equipment should be placed. There have been a number of meetings about it, and I believe there's information that was shared with most of you in advance via email before this meeting. So at this time, we'll take a couple questions if you have any about the reasoning or any other questions related to this recommendation from John and the air monitoring subcommittee. And in this, actually can't see anybody's hands. Let me see if there's any hands. Please raise your hand if you have any questions or comments, or specifically if you have concerns. In the absence of raising your hand, I will assume you have no questions and no concerns. Debbie.
I would just like to know, are you planning on putting a machinery at each of these sites then?
Yeah, Debbie, yes. So each of these sites here, each of these schools here would have air monitoring equipment placed at them to measure all these different pollutants. So yeah, that's what this plan represents.
That's great. I think that's wonderful.
Thanks, Debbie. So if there's anyone with a question or a concern, now's a great time to raise your hand and let us know what those are. Otherwise, we will move forward with the subcommittee's recommendations on these air monitoring locations. It looks like Margot's happy with focusing monitors at schools. Ned's got a comment. Thanks to the work that the group that's working on the subcommittee, the camp subcommittee. So kudos to all of you. I'm looking at the chat. I don't see any additional hands, and I don't see any additional questions, only comments in support. Stacy has a comment about clarification on the $5 million and use it or lose it. And this is specifically, I think, related to the port measures. So I'll ask the Air District to drop that content into the chat itself. As it relates to this map, yeah.
Erica, it seems like we do have a question from Ned. Will we have paired monitors to measure inside and outside pollutants?
Thank you for that, Hannah. I did not see Ned's comment.
It's hard to keep track of chat sometimes.
It's true. John, can you answer that question on whether we'll have paired monitors to measure inside and outside pollutants?
Yeah, thanks for that. And we've had that question a few times, and thanks for asking that, Ned. And that's something that we can work on together as we think about the school filtration part of the SERP for Stockton, thinking about how we can complement that along with air monitoring at these schools to try to merge those two together. So that's something we can keep talking about as we develop that specific measure.
Great. I don't see any more hands. Let's see, Robin's got a question. I think this is also related to the port again, so I want to close this out and then maybe we'll go back to this comment or question about the funding for the port. I don't see any more hands or questions or concerns being expressed in the chat, which means that the subcommittee recommendations, it looks like we've got group consensus to proceed with those. And so speak now or forever hold your peace if you have any concerns about these locations, but there seems to be a lot of support for it in the chat. So we are comfortable moving forward based on everything that I'm seeing. So thank you to John and Chai and to the larger subcommittee for that work. And I think that is a green light to move forward. Camp looks good. Thanks for working on it. So yeah, I think we're good to move on there. I do want to acknowledge that there are still some questions, and maybe we can take 1 or 2 minutes, Ryan, to explain the funding process here as it relates to the port measures and why that bucket of funding isn't just available again, because I think that's come up a couple times. So let's really make sure that we understand that, if you don't mind.
Yeah, so going back to a couple of the conversations that we had when we talked about the incentive measures. So starting off, and I know this is something that Todd also dropped into the chat, that the money that the district received for AB 617 incentive funding doesn't have earmarks. The funding is able to be used in any low-income disadvantaged communities. And we talked about it during the development phase that provided our ability to identify measures and work that we could get done within the timeframes, that's kind of where we would get those incentive funds, and so, or like allocated those funds. And so when we look at the other measures, that's what we think we can reasonably get done within the timeframes, and lacking the ability to in our estimation get more done in those areas. We kind of looked towards the higher end of what, like, really stretching ourselves and making every effort to spend every dollar. That's how we got to those amounts for those other incentive measures. And so we have a general concern if we didn't, and I know Kyle also mentioned this about not wanting to be in a situation where we weren't able to spend the funds, and then potentially that money would have to go back to CARB, and the valley itself would be the losers in that case. And so that is why that we can't reallocate, in addition to the direction from the board. The allowance, the SERP itself has been adopted. The dollar amounts for those have been adopted, and so we also have to abide by that. But really, it has to do with our best estimation of how much we could spend on those other incentive measures.
Thanks for that feedback, Ryan. And if there are additional questions or comments about his response to that question, please do drop those in the chat. I know we won't have a ton of time to move that forward in this agenda, but we did want to acknowledge it, and hopefully we'll be able to get you a written answer. All right, so moving forward, we have just a few more minutes, and in the spirit of community engagement, we want to make sure we leave a little bit of a time for public comment and make sure that if there is any, that we have that space allowed. So at this time, I will ask if we do have any public comments either on Zoom, on YouTube, or on Facebook Live. If you happen to be on the Zoom, press *9 to raise your hand or unmute yourself. And you can also enter a comment in the chat now. And I'm happy to call on any. And I'll ask Heather as well if there are any comments that she's received from the email address that we need to address today.
Heather might stepped out for a second, so I don't know if maybe Zon can see the YouTube
or
feed.
Zon.
Mm-hmm.
Let's make sure that we've got. I think Zon started to talk, but then she's
Zon is checking.
muted.
Yes.
Yes. While she's looking, I know there's a number of public members on the line. I just want to make sure that you have the chance to raise your hand and ask or answer a question or make a public comment now. Now is the time. I'm seeing none. Zong or Heather, any public comments on the Facebook or the YouTube account?
We are good. Thank you.
Thank you, Heather. All right, well then that concludes that portion of our agenda. And I would just like to thank everyone that has participated in this meeting and that has weighed in. We've reached pretty much the end of it. And I do want to ask our community co-host and our Air District host if they have any additional comments at this time before we close.
Sure. I just wanted to say thank you, everybody. Dylan, I feel you. I understand, and I'm looking forward to being able to work past a lot of these issues and develop the trust and transparency that and when you guys are just out there, all you have is documents to read, and you don't get any context, or you don't understand kind of the port's overall goals and missions. I think that that's frustrating. And unfortunately, in the time we are where we can't be together and just meet and talk things out, that hasn't helped. But I do look forward to working with everybody here and rebuild some of the trust and transparency issues that have developed over the years. So thank you guys. I appreciate it.
Thank you for that comment, Jeff. And I think the committee is really looking forward to working with you moving forward as well. Ryan, did you have any closing thoughts for this group before we adjourn?
No, just really want to thank everybody, and I think you said it very well, Erica. That there was a lot of tough conversation tonight. I think everybody had an opportunity to share their point of view and their thoughts, and it was done in a manner that I think it really allowed for that free and open dialogue, which we definitely want to continue moving forward. And so, thank you so much.
And Erica,
Thank
it looks
you,
like
Ryan.
there is maybe a closing comment or question from Mary Elizabeth.
Mary Elizabeth, we do see your hand. Do you have a quick closing comment?
Yes, I do. I just, it is such a shame that, and I put the chat away, but I'd save it every so often, and I noticed that there's people are still having a lot of questions about, this money. And, I hear, imagine that there's like two things going on. We want the money, we don't want to give it to the port. And I'm just wondering, how we could resolve that so that we keep that money here in our community doing good work.
It's a good comment, good question. I don't know if there is a solution. I'll turn that over to the Air District and the CARB team, and maybe that's something that could be brought back to another meeting, given that the port measures certainly aren't included in your current SERP. What options do exist, right? There's been conversation in the chat today about subcommittees and others. What are the options that are available given the framework that's available to the CSC? I'll allow Ryan to kind of close that out today, but Ryan, do you have a comment on or response to that comment?
Yeah, it's similar to what I shared before. I mean, I think we were, when we discussed the process of going through and developing incentive measures and understanding that, putting dollar amounts to it, that we erred on the side of the higher amount that we think that we could spend. So it's not a situation, and being honest with the committee that, what we wouldn't do is just add money to things that we don't think we can get done, just to add that money, because that puts the funding at risk, and that's not something that we can do. And that's me trying to be 100% honest, and I think that was what was shared at several of the other meetings when it came to this process. And what I'm saying here hasn't changed, and so that's the situation that we're in.
Right.
I mean,
so it sounds like
at the same time, I mean, I want to highlight. I mean, $32 million is a lot of money to be spent in the community that are getting a lot of great emission reductions, a lot of exposure reductions. So many of the new ideas like, in-home air filtration, school air filtration, all these other things that are going to benefit the community. It's not a small amount of money. It's a huge amount of money. It's still going to be challenging to even spend the $32 million. But it's going to take a collective effort of everybody here. And the people that in the community that are going to have to, that we're going to be reaching out to and trying to encourage them to take advantage of all these different opportunities. There's a huge responsibility that we all have to try to spend the money that is in the approved SERP, and we're ready to roll up our sleeves and work hard with everybody on this committee to do just that.
Great. Well, thank you, Ryan. It does sound like there's some ongoing questions around this, and certainly maybe the Air District team can kind of document some of what you've written. or what you've said in writing to clarify if that's possible for the CSC members, so that there's real understanding on why you can't reallocate to the existing CERT measures or add additional funding to the CERT measures that have already been approved. There continues to be some questions around that. Certainly that we don't have to discuss today, but maybe in a follow-up email would be appropriate, so that there is something in writing around that process and clarity around how that moves forward. And it sounds like that there is already an attempt to spend the $32 million, and that could be a heavy lift. Adding more to it may or may not even be feasible, but I think just clarifying in writing might be helpful for the CSC based on some of the comments that I'm seeing in the chat at the end of this meeting. So as we are at 7 o'clock, and I want to be mindful and respectful of everyone's time, I want to be thankful as well for everyone's feedback and comments. I want to thank the community co-host and certainly the Air District team and the CARB teams and all of you that have been on this call today. I want to thank you for your candor, for your kindness, and for sharing your stories today, and for working together as a team, assuming the best of one another and making some tough decisions today. But things are moving forward, and in your next meeting, you're going to learn a little bit more about what happens next now that you're in implementation, right? So certainly these discussions will continue, and you will learn more from the Air District and CARB and others about how we do this now that the 5-year clock kind of really has, now that the CERT's approved and you're now into a second stage of this process. So thank you everyone for a wonderful discussion tonight. We look forward to seeing you next time, and please have a wonderful rest of the week. Bye everyone.
Thank you.